Today we're going to be talking about photosynthesis. Energy is needed by all living organisms, including plants, animals, and marine organisms as well. But where does this come from? The sun. The sun provides the energy that helps plants make food for other organisms. There are two types of organisms, autotrophs and heterotrophs. Autotrophs make their own food, like plants. Heterotrophs can't, so they have to eat autotrophs to gain energy. So the sun provides the light energy that is used by plants to make food, which are then eaten by other animals through a series of chains. This is basically the transfer of energy. There are two main processes of energy, photosynthesis and cellular respiration. The energy molecule involved in this is ATP. We'll talk more about this later. Photosynthesis is basically the production of glucose in plant cells and only occurs in autotrophs. The chemical formula for photosynthesis is CO2 plus H2O plus light equals glucose and oxygen as a waste. But where does everything come from and go? Before we go into details, let's talk about redox reactions. They're also called oxidation-reduction reactions. They are the transfer of electrons. Redox reactions release energy when electrons move closer to more electronegative atoms. It's most important information. Both photosynthesis and cellular respiration allow the transfer of electrons, thus providing us with energy ATP. Oxidation is when electrons are lost, while reduction is when electrons are gained. So in this equation here, X loses an electron while Y gains an electron. In the chemical equation, Na plus Cl equals Na plus chlorine minus, the reducing agent, otherwise known as the electron donor, is Na, while oxidizing agent, or the electron acceptor, is Cl. Photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplasts of plant cells. There are two main processes, light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. Light-dependent reactions occurs in the thylakoids, while the Calvin cycle occurs in the stroma. The chlorophyll in the thylakoid membranes absorbs sunlight in a set quantity known as photons. Photons are just a discrete amount of particles that are not tangible. When molecules absorb photons, the electrons in its orbits move from a ground state to an excited state. Chlorophyll is organized into photosystems. There are photosystem 1 and 2 in a typical chloroplast. It contains different types of pigments such as A, B, and carotenoids. There's also a reaction center and a primary electron acceptor. But how do all these components play out? Two ways light reactions occurs, non-cyclic and cyclic. Non-cyclic involves both photosystems 1 and 2. The photon absorbed by the photosystem hops along until reaching the reaction center P680. This causes the electron to jump up and get carried by the primary acceptor. Water is split into hydrogen ions, oxygen, and electrons. This electron replaces the reaction center, and oxygen leaves as a waste. The primary acceptor travels along the first electron transport chain through a series of proteins. The energy through its exergonic process creates ATP, also known as non-cyclic photophosphorylation. After reaching photosystem 1, the same thing occurs. Light causes the electron to be carried by the primary acceptor. Water is split, and this electron replaces reaction center, and oxygen leaves as a waste. The primary acceptor travels along a second transport chain, ending in RDP reductase, which creates the electron carrier NADPH. This is a long, complicated process, but light reactions can occur in a simple way through cyclic electron flow. During the cyclic electron flow, it is shorter, uses only photosystem 1, doesn't produce oxygen nor NADPH, but only produces ATP. The cell uses a cyclic motion when it doesn't have enough ATP and doesn't need to produce NADPH. So in cyclic, only photosystem 1 is used. Light shines, causing the electron to be trapped by the primary acceptor. Instead of traveling along a second transport chain, it travels along a circular chain of proteins. This produces ATP through an exergonic process and is known as cyclic photophosphorylation. And only photosystem 1 is used. Remember, it doesn't produce oxygen or NADPH. The ATP generated from the electron flow is used to make ATP through a process called chemiosmosis. What is chemiosmosis? It is the process of creating ATP by establishing a proton gradient along the thylakoid membrane. Sounds a handful? Let's simplify. After splitting water, the hydrogen ions remain in the stroma, and they're being pumped back into the thylakoid space through the energy created by the electron flow. However, there is an enzyme called ATP synthase in the membrane that produces ATP while the hydrogen ions are being diffused back into the stroma. That is how ATP is created. There are 3 steps: carbon fixation, reduction, regeneration of CO2 acceptor. Remember, the Calvin cycle occurs in the stroma, so it doesn't need light. The first step is carbon fixation. Each CO2 molecule that enters gets incorporated into a 5-carbon sugar called RUBP by ribosco, an enzyme. The end product, phosphoglycerate, gets reduced through various molecules into finally something called glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, otherwise known as G3P. One of these molecules is left as glucose. In this process, 6 ATP and 6 NADPH is used. That's reduction. The remaining G3P gets rearranged into RUBP, ready for the next CO2. To sum up, photosynthesis is divided into light reactions and the Calvin cycle. Light and water enter the thylakoids and oxygen leaves as a waste. In the Calvin cycle, CO2 enters and glucose leaves as a product. In this process, light reactions produce ATP and NADPH, while Calvin cycle reduces them to ADP and NADP+. Thank you for watching. Hope this video helped you. See you next time.